Is the upcoming horror movie The Purge a secret assault on the Tea Party, the NRA, and Christianity? I don't think so, but Fox News is worried about it, and so they have an article talking about this. They've got a couple of quotes on their side. We're going to break down both sides and then say why this is completely ridiculous. And the reason I think it's ridiculous, very different than Fox News is, by the way. So there's a guy, this is Dan Gaynor, the VP of Business and Culture at the Media Research Institute. It's kind of his pet theory that the director of The Purge is targeting the Tea Party and the NRA. And so let's listen to him first. He says, Director James DeMonaco makes it clear the movie is a direct attack on the NRA, an organization filled with millions of law-abiding gun owners. The loony left's reflexive hatred of the Second Amendment is founded in the concept that people who don't break the law are somehow evil for exercising their constitutional rights. The Purge is also an obvious attack on the Tea Party and Christians. So he's laying out his case there. Now, when you actually listen to the statements of the director, you can understand, I guess, where the conspiracy theory comes from. So let's go to director James DeMonaco. He says, I layered in these new founding fathers, that's the leadership of the 2022 United States, by the way, in The Purge. This regime that we voted into power at some point, some kind of NRA thing that took over the country. But I kind of left that to the audience. I think sometimes in my writing I try to spoon feed too much. It's better to let the audience make their own decisions on things. Now, from the reviews that I've read, the plot is anything but subtle, anything but lightly spoon-fed. It is very heavily spoon-fed to the audience. Now, it does have a political message. I don't think that it's particularly against the Tea Party, but I can understand why Fox News would be at least a little bit worried based on that statement, since he does seem to cop to it at least a little bit. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers. I haven't actually watched the movie, and it's unlikely that I will. But the basic idea, the political message, which apparently hits you over the head like a hammer, is that they allow crime for 12 hours every year. And during that time, if you're part of the 1% and you can afford these sophisticated security outfits for your house and things like that, you'll be just fine. And it's really the poor that bear the brunt of the violence and the crime and things like that. And the odd message of the movie seems to be that the rampant killing of the poor actually makes the country better, which doesn't seem to really go along with what James DeMonaco seems to want to get across as a political message. But the idea is that we have voted into office sort of bloodthirsty, survival of the fittest sorts of politicians, and I can understand how those might come from the NRA or from the Tea Party, I suppose. And like I said, his statements do seem to cop to that to some extent. Now, Dan Gaynor of the Media Research Institute goes on to say, the entertainment industry loves trying to depict the U.S. as the bad guy. Movies used to show the good things about our nation. Now Hollywood execs clearly avoid that whenever possible. I don't know that I agree with that on principle. I think that if you were to watch the history of Wild West films and things of that sort, war films, we're killing people left and right constantly. Now, we may have thought that those were justified killings, justified wars, and things of that nature. But violence in Hollywood have gone hand in hand for many decades. This is not beginning with The Purge and other horror movies like that. So I think that Dan Gaynor is incorrect, at least in that area. Now, there might have been a willingness in the past in Hollywood to gloss over some of the problems in the country, like early on, civil rights issues and things of that sort clearly weren't covered. Early on in Wild West films, the slaughter of the Indians was done with no sympathy whatsoever to that community. Now, eventually that did change in more recent decades, the sort of revisionist Western films and things of that sort. But I think that he's wrong in a couple of cases. And what I love is the scapegoating of Hollywood. That Hollywood is the problem. Again, we've seen this all year, since Sandy Hook, actually, that Hollywood is the problem. You know, they don't like real Americans, they lead to violence and things of that sort. Now, what I love about that is that, of course, we've shown you that the NRA loves, when it's appropriate for their purposes, to highlight Hollywood. Like the best guns of Hollywood, the best action scenes of Hollywood. The NRA Museum has a Hollywood exhibit. So when it makes guns look fun and exciting, they love Hollywood. It's only when the guns and violence actually lead to deaths in the real world that they want to scapegoat it and say that that's the reason for all of our violence. Now, you can, of course, take the statements of Dan Gaynor and director James DeMonaco and decide for yourself whether or not this is actually intended to take down the NRA or the Tea Party or something like that. I think that if anyone is going to suffer as a result of this movie, it's the people going to see it, because it does not look like a very enjoyable film. I've read that some of the performances are good, and I don't fault anyone for getting involved in it, because the concept, at least, is interesting. The idea that you have this day of anything goes. But of course, while there are the very heavy-handed political messages underlying it, it is just basically a home invasion film, which is just very common historically in horror movies. And so I think that this film by itself is unlikely to lead to any durable political change in America.